to the Free From Lifestyle. I've been thinking about recording this video for some time now because if you're new to having a Ninja, you will know the struggles with pressure cooking. I'm no expert, I'm still learning, but I've definitely gained a few tips and tricks along the way. And I thought if I can give you quite a simple guide to using the pressure cook option, then it will just help you so much. When I first started pressure cooking, I didn't know what release to put it on, how long to cook things for, how much liquid to use, and the length of time to cook different grains, starches, meats. It's really confusing. Now, pressure cooking is seen as a bit of an old-fashioned method, isn't it? I think Ninja have really turned that around and made a cooking method really easy to use by having the 15-in-1. It's just getting to grips with the timings. The real benefit of pressure cooking, of course, is speeding up that cooking process. So most things can be cooked in, say, like a third or a half of the time, which is brilliant. We all have busy lifestyles, so that is really a good function to have. So many times I've not added enough liquid into the machine and it will bleep at you and tell you that there's not enough liquid, and then obviously you have to open it up, add the liquid, and it's a bit of a pain, to be honest. So generally I end up putting a little bit too much liquid in, and then with some dishes that's a pain because you then get a really runny sauce and you need to like thicken it. Things that you need to consider are definitely the density of the food, the size of the food, and the quantity that you've got in there. For example, if you're cooking a whole potato, it may take 10 to 15 minutes. But if you're going to dice it up into little small chunks, it could take as little as 2 minutes. With regards to the liquid, when we talk about liquid, if you're using things like cream or tomato or a milk-based sauce, then you are still going to need some actual liquid, which when I say liquid, I mean stock or water. Because if not, those are too thick and you just will not come up to pressure. It's the thin liquid, so the water or the stock, that actually will produce the steam that we need inside the pressure cooker. One of the things I really love about using the pressure cook function is that it creates a flavour like you've cooked something all day. So imagine if you put something in the slow cooker, how tender and flavourful that can be. I think pressure cooking is as good, but just the quick option. And to get the maximum amount of flavour out of your food, I definitely opt for stock as my liquid rather than water, because it really does help emphasise that. Certain foods are going to be more suited to pressure cooking. Obviously, it's a wet environment. When you're pressure cooking, you're not going to get any sort of crispy texture. It's really suited to things that you would normally boil, braise or steam. So we've got a high and a low setting, and it really depends on how vigorous you want the cooking to be. So no different if you were putting something in the oven or on the hob. You have to consider whether it needs to be done at a higher temperature or a lower temperature. If you try to relate your pressure cooking to things that you're making on the hob, so for example, if we were, say, boiling pasta, that would be fully submerged in water, and therefore when you're putting it in the pressure cooker and you're cooking your pasta, again, you want it to be fully submerged. If you were braising, say like a piece of meat, you'd want to sear it first, and then you'd have a smaller amount of liquid and it wouldn't be fully submerged. And if you want to steam something, you don't want it actually in the water or touching the water, so you want the water below that and you want it higher up, say on a rack. And this is ideal for things like, say, eggs, vegetables, potatoes. So if you want to opt for a quick release, that is your quickest option for getting rid of the pressure inside the pot. So this is reducing the pressure in the pot really fast, lowering the boiling point of the liquid. I would never use this for meat, as it would just literally draw out all the moisture and make the cut of meat dry. Or for example, if you had, say, like roast chicken in here, it would probably cause the chicken just to fall apart. However, if you've got food in here that is fully submerged in liquid, then quick release would be fine. I like to use the quick release for things like vegetables. So you cook them for the perfect amount of time and you don't want them to overcook. So say like you've got some broccoli in there, for example, you want it just to be lovely and tender, but you don't want the process to continue cooking. Hence, get rid of that pressure quick as possible, and that stops that cooking process really quickly and stops that broccoli from going mushy. I found that this works quite well for soups. You want a little bit of evaporation, but obviously you don't want too much because you're creating a liquid and you don't want that to draw out and cook any longer than you need it to. When you actually look at the manual, it says not to use the quick release for starchy foods. However, I've actually made some pasta dishes, which obviously to me, that is a starchy food. And I found that actually the quick release works really well on that. Because I don't want my pasta to be overcooked, I want it to be just right. So again, I use it for pasta, but let me know in the comments if you use it and what you think to that. So generally, the quick release I wouldn't use for any meat whatsoever. The only time I would go with a quick release is if I've got meat, say like maybe in a stew, like in a liquid, therefore it is fully submerged, it would actually then be fine. Because it's in the liquid, it's not going to dry out. If you're cooking chicken in it, then your chicken thighs are going to be a lot more forgiving because of the fat content, but if you were using breast, then they are definitely going to dry out. I love making mashed potato in the pressure cooker. It just gives it so much flavour. It's really quick and easy to do, and I have to say it's probably the best mashed potato that I've ever made. And I always use stock. So we spoke about that earlier, a way of infusing extra flavour into it, and that is a great tip to definitely use some stock in your potatoes rather than water. I pressure cooked mine for quite a long time, so 15 minutes, because I wanted those potatoes to be super soft, but I then used a quick release. So again, this is interesting because the manual says starchy foods, don't use quick release, but I think that for me, to use cooking the potatoes for a lengthy amount of time, so I knew that they were definitely going to be really super soft, but having that quick release just to get rid of that pressure fast, it worked perfectly. So moving on to the natural release option, this can actually take up to 30 minutes for the pressure to be released, so you do need to take that into consideration. But this means that there's no rapid changes in pressure that cause evaporation of steam. So this means that it keeps juices in the food, so it's really perfect for lean meats like chicken, pork, beef. Then you really want to use your natural release. And during a natural release of pressure, your food is actually still cooking during that time. So you definitely need to factor that in so that things don't get overcooked. The temperature is not going to go down drastically, and therefore you've got a slow cook during that release. Now this is an interesting one, and I don't know if many people know this. I've had this for ages, this machine, and I've only just realised that you can do this. So when you select the delayed release, it brings up this option here, release pressure. If you click on that, I can see here it's got set. So the default is actually 10 minutes on a delayed release, and I've always just stuck with that. But if you look here, you can change it. So we could have 15 minutes, we could have 20 minutes delayed release, you know, it keeps going. But to me, I don't really understand, if I'm honest, why you would even use this. Because to me, if you're going to change that and make the pressure release much longer, then why wouldn't you just go with a natural release? So I'm hoping that one of you out there can explain that to me. So if we're going with a delayed release, default is 10 minutes, why don't we just stick with that? If not, choose a natural release, and therefore it's going to be slow and longer. Why would you want 15 minutes instead of 10 minutes on a delayed release? If you've had success with using that, I'd love to hear from you. Leave me a comment below. A great example of using delayed release is for something like rice. So I pressure cook mine on high for only 2 minutes, so really minimal amount of time. But of course we've got that delayed release where we are going to continue a little bit of the cooking process, and then I just use the default, so that's 10 minutes, and that gives me absolutely perfect rice. One other thing to consider when you're pressure cooking is that if you're a little bit short of time, then of course you could put boiling water into there, and therefore it's just going to get to pressure that little bit faster than if you were just to put in some cold water. Some examples of me pressure cooking are things like when I made a pasta bolognese. So the bolognese, after I'd used the sear and saute, I then flipped it over to pressure cook. And with that, I used natural release, and that went on for 6 minutes, and that came out absolutely perfect. When you pressure cook, you can actually use the probe at the same time, which is great when you're making something like gammon. So for my gammon recipe, I popped the probe inside the meat, and you want to make sure that you get the center of the meat. And then there's some presets, so I just then chose pork and well done, and that was cooked beautifully. When I made my Spanish chicken and rice, I made that as a 2-part meal, and it was a pot-in-pot method for the rice. I opted for the delayed release, so I went with the standard default of 10 minutes on that. I cooked the actual meal for 7 minutes. Although I was using chicken breast, the chicken was fully submerged at the bottom of the pot, so there was absolutely no problem with using that. But I didn't want to use a quick release because I didn't want to risk it drying out too much. Plus, by having the delayed release, I had that little bit of extra time to make sure that that rice was steamed perfectly. So when I'm cooking pasta in the pressure cooker, I go with a rough guide of a ratio of 1:2. Say I'm using around 225 grams of pasta, I would use 475 millilitres of liquid. So that's the equivalent of, say, 8 ounces to around 2 cups. Or 12 ounces would be 3 cups. 16 ounces would be 4 cups. Timings wise for pasta, I've actually found if I use something like penne and I want the pasta to be soft, then I cook that for 6 minutes. If you wanted it more al dente, then I would go with a little bit less, so maybe 5. Spaghetti needs a little bit less cooking, so 5 minutes for soft, 4 minutes for al dente. And macaroni, again, a little bit less, 4 minutes for soft and around 3 minutes for al dente. I hope that kind of helps, gives you a little guide there of roughly what I'm doing. My pasta, say the packet says 12 minutes, I basically half it to 6 minutes. And I found that works really well so far. The way I look at it is that the more rapid change in pressure there is, the more evaporation of steam that happens quicker. So quick release is gonna get that out really fast, and therefore it's gonna stop that cooking, drop the temperature quicker. Delayed release is going to be slightly slower, a little bit more steady, but you're still getting it out at quite a good rate. And then you've got the slowest option, which is your natural release, which is going to go really slow and steady, perfect for meats. I really do hope this video has helped you in some way, and I'd love it if you'd comment, share your experiences, any tips that you've got. I'm definitely still experimenting all the time to try and get the best pressure cooking options that I can, and I'm really enjoying the food made in this way. If you like this video, then please do hit the like button. It helps my channel so much. And don't forget to subscribe if you would like more videos based on my Ninja 15 in 1. And I hope to see you again for another video.